Hey guys, tonight we begin with something special, a journey into a world that is not distant in time, yet feels like another planet altogether. Our story isn't about kings or empires, but about the walls of a single building, walls that swallowed whole generations of men, women, and children. It's about the ordinary grind that shaped extraordinary suffering. Before we step into tonight's story, take a second to like this video and subscribe, so these mysteries can reach others in your family too. And in the comments, tell me your location and the exact time you're watching this. It's always fascinating to see where you're tuning in from, almost like tiny lights glowing on a map across the world. Now, settle in, because what waits for us is not a battlefield, not a palace, but a mill, a place where the roar of machines never ended, where the air itself turned against you, and where life was measured in lint, noise, and fines. The morning begins before the sun has truly risen. The town, crouched in the valley, is heavy with mist and soot, a dull grey that stains even the first light of dawn. Rows of brick houses lean into one another, as if they too are tired, their chimneys coughing out thin trails of smoke that mix with the low-hanging fog. The cobblestone streets glisten with dampness, slick from the previous night's drizzle, and the air tastes faintly of coal, iron, and something sour. Perhaps yesterday's waste washed into the gutters. If you stand still, if you listen long enough, you notice that the town is not silent. The hum of something distant vibrates faintly in the background. It is not birdsong, nor the rustle of leaves, for there are few birds here and fewer trees. Instead, it is the restless heart of the mill, the machines already awake, already groaning before the workers arrive. That hum will soon swell into a roar, but for now, it is a promise. At the far end of the street rises the mill itself, a monolith of red brick and iron-framed windows, taller and wider than anything else around it. Its walls seem damp, as though they perspire with the condensation of steam and labor. Looms and spindles are waiting inside, waiting with the patience of machines that do not sleep. They will soon be fed with cotton and wool, with the sweat of children, with the time and breath of men and women who have no other place to go. The gates stand at the front, iron bars set into stone pillars, tall enough to remind the worker of who owns the building and of who merely passes through. They are not decorative. They are practical, solid, unbending, the kind of gates that tell you they will open on time and close on time, and that your life in between will be measured not by your own will, but by theirs. The sound they make is almost human, a long metallic groan, as if the hinges themselves dislike the morning as much as the workers do. The creak carries down the street, rolling through the mist, calling out to every household, every bed, where a weary body has tried to rest. It is the summons of labor, the iron voice of industry. It is the mill gates opening, and so the people emerge. They come quietly, shoulders hunched, scarves pulled tight, boots or bare feet finding the rhythm of cobblestones. There is no chatter, no cheerful greeting. The mill does not ask for cheer, and the workers have long ago learned not to waste energy on anything unnecessary. Most are young, many are very young, faces thin and pale, hands already calloused though the bodies they belong to are still growing. They do not walk like children going to school. They walk like tools, being carried to where they belong. The older workers move more slowly, their bodies stiff with years of the same routine. Men with grey threaded through their hair, women with lines around their eyes, each step marked by the weight of days that look exactly like yesterday, exactly like tomorrow. They too were once the children rushing through these gates, and their presence is a reminder that the mill does not release its hold easily. Once inside, one tends to remain inside until body or machine finally decides otherwise. The overseers arrive as well, though they do not hurry. Their boots are heavier, their coats thicker, their hats taller. They carry themselves differently, as if the fog parts for them alone. They hold small books and pencils in their hands. For the mill demands not only labor but record, not only movement but account. Those books are filled with numbers, how many threads snapped, how many hours lost, how many fines issued. The workers know that their mistakes will live longer in those books than their names ever will. The gates creak again as another surge of bodies is drawn inside. The noise of iron against iron is sharp, echoing against the brick walls of the houses nearby. Dogs bark, restless children cry. But the gates pay no mind. Their purpose is only to open and to close, to admit the river of workers and then seal the world inside. Step by step, the people pass into the courtyard. It is broad and open, yet somehow suffocating. The tall mill walls rise on all sides, blotting out what little morning sun has managed to pierce the mist. Here, there is no sky, only brick and window, window and brick, each pane reflecting the faint glow of lamps burning within. You can hear the machines now, louder than before, as though they have been impatient for this moment. A deep thrum, a steady churn, the cough and hiss of steam pipes. It is a sound that never truly stops. Even in the night, when the town tries to sleep, the mill breathes on. Inside the courtyard, workers gather into lines, not by choice, but by design. The overseers tick off names, or sometimes just count heads. There is no kindness in it, no recognition of the individual, only confirmation that the required number of bodies has arrived. If someone is missing, a mark goes into a book. That mark is not a record of absence. It is a record of punishment. The fine will follow, and perhaps worse. The younger children glance up at the gates as they close again, slowly, heavily, the iron bars sliding back into place. The sound is final, like a lock turning. Outside lies the rest of the town, the homes, the small fires, the mothers waiting, the streets glistening with dampness. Inside lies the day, long, unyielding, filled with noise and dust and the constant risk of error. The children know this not from imagination, but from memory. They have lived it before. As the last bar clicks into place, the day begins. The mill has taken its people, and the town resumes its stillness. Only the faint tremor of machinery leaking through the bricks remains to remind the outside world of what is happening within. For those who entered, there will be little difference between morning and afternoon, between daylight and dusk. The mill erases time. Hours stretch, collapse, fold into one another. The only markers are the overseer's whistle, the snap of a thread, the fine imposed for a mistake. The gates are the first boundary, but they are not the only one. Once you are inside, the mill surrounds you, absorbs you, and decides how you will spend your strength. This is the opening ritual, repeated day after day, year after year. The gates creak, the people pass through, the noise swells, the lint rises into the air. It is not dramatic. It is not marked by trumpets or proclamations. It is ordinary, relentlessly ordinary, and that is its power. The gates need not threaten or chase. They simply open, and the people come. The smell grows stronger as the crowd shuffles toward the doors. Cotton dust, oil from the machines, coal smoke from the boilers. All of it mixes into the air, thick and dry, clinging to the throat. Already, one coughs, then another. The overseers glance at them briefly, not in concern, but in calculation. A cough is a weakness. A weakness slows production, and slowed production is fined. Everything is measured, even the air in your lungs. And so, the chapter of the day has begun. The gates stand behind, closed and silent, while ahead lies the thunder of looms and spindles, the endless repetition of labor. What entered through the creaking gates was a crowd of people. What will emerge many hours later will be the same crowd, yet also changed, drained, shaped once more by the mill's unyielding rhythm. The town will wait outside, but inside, the mill does not wait. Its hunger is steady, mechanical, and it is fed the moment those iron gates creak open. The fog does not lift with the rising sun. Instead, it thickens. turning the narrow lanes into corridors of grey. The light that breaks across the rooftops is not golden, but dull, muted by soot that lingers in the air. The mill stands at the town's edge, its tall chimney already breathing out a steady column of smoke that merges with the morning mist, so that sky and ground blur together. This is dawn, in a place where industry has become the horizon, where even the first hour of the day belongs not to the earth or the sky, but to the machine. The streets are uneven, laid long ago in rough cobblestones that are slick with coal dust. At their edges, gutters run dark with water from last night's rain, mixed with ash and the husks of cotton fibres that spill from the mill. These little tufts cling to boots, to skirts, to the corners of doorways. No matter how one sweeps, the lint returns, floating unseen until it gathers again. Proof that the mill does not only occupy the workers, but also seeps into the bones of the town itself. The houses lean together as if exhausted, long rows of brick terraces, their windows small and their doors scuffed from countless hands. Behind each one lies a cramped room, or two at most, where whole families sleep side by side. The air inside is not fresh, but heavy with breath, smoke from the small stoves, and always the faint tang of damp. It is difficult to rest well in such places, for the night does not banish the mill. The sound of the machinery travels through walls and into dreams, so that even in sleep one hears the steady clatter, the roll and grind, the mechanical heartbeat of the looms. When the first whistle sounded earlier in the morning, it was not just the gates that stirred, but also these houses. The whistle is shrill, carrying across roofs and alleys, striking against windows. Children startle awake, mothers rise quickly, fathers groan and stretch stiff limbs. No alarm clock is needed. The mill provides its own, and no household dares to ignore it. The whistle is as binding as law, a summons that allows no excuse. Inside one house, a mother ties a kerchief over her hair and hands a crust of bread to her son, who is no older than 10. His fingers clutch it eagerly, though he knows it must last him until midday, when he may be allowed a brief moment to eat again. His sister, younger still, rubs sleep from her eyes and coughs, her lungs already struggling against the dust that fills her days. Their father stands by the door, waiting silently. His boots are patched, his hands roughened, his shoulders bent from long hours at the frame. There is little conversation. Words are saved for when they are useful. The morning requires only movement. The street outside fills with others just the same. Women pulling shawls tight against the damp, men carrying tin pails, children stumbling sleepily, clutching at siblings. A horse-drawn cart rattles by, its wheels clattering against stone, loaded with raw cotton that has travelled across oceans only to end its journey here, in this fog-choked town. The bales are heavy, bound with twine, already shedding fibres that drift through the air like pale snow. Workers glance at them, but do not linger. They know that soon enough they will be breathing that same cotton dust for hours without pause. Shop shutters remain closed. There is little business to be done in the early light, for most of the town is either within the mill or on its way there. The few taverns that open late into the night now stand quiet, their doorways sticky with spilled ale, the air inside still carrying the sour smell of drink and smoke. Perhaps later, when the shift ends, some will return to those dim corners to dull the ache in their bodies. But for now, the streets flow in one direction only, toward the great chimney that marks the center of their world. The smoke thickens as one nears the mill. Coal fires roar in the boilers, feeding the steam engines that keep the looms alive. Ash settles on windowsills and rooftops, on laundry lines strung between houses. White linens turn grey before they are ever worn. Children who play in the alleys return with blackened hands, their hair smelling of smoke. The town is not merely surrounded by soot, it breathes it, swallows it, carries it in its lungs. Even those who do not work in the mill cannot escape it. The butcher, the cobbler, the widow who takes in sewing, all live under the same pall. When it rains, the The water that pools in the street runs black. When the sun shines, it glows dimly, its rays dulled by the haze. The seasons matter little. Winter is cold and damp. Summer is hot and stifling. Autumn and spring differ only in the colour of the mud. Through all of it, the mill continues, steady, relentless, consuming day after day. Children too small to work linger near doorways, watching their older siblings disappear into the gates. Their games are short, often played with scraps, pebbles, broken sticks, pieces of discarded thread. Yet even their play is marked by the mill. They imitate the rhythm of looms, the whistle of the overseer, the cough of a worker bent over his task. They know, even before they enter, what their lives will be. It waits for them, patient, inevitable. The town itself seems designed to serve the mill. The streets converge toward it. The rows of housing are built within walking distance. The shops provide only what is needed for survival: bread, coal, cloth, a pint of ale. There is little beauty here, little ornament. The churches are plain, their bells drowned by the mill's whistle. The schoolrooms are small, often half empty, for many children are already within the mill rather than at their lessons. The rhythm of the town is not marked by Sunday or holiday, but by the hours of labour, the turn of the machines. At dawn, this becomes most visible. Every lane spills its people toward the same gate. The town empties itself into the courtyard, as if all its streets are tributaries feeding a single river. The sound of boots on cobblestones grows louder, joined by coughing, by the rustle of clothes. The fog swallows them, yet the mill waits clearly ahead, its chimney rising like a dark finger pointing toward the sky. Some glance upward as they walk, though not in hope. The sky above is never truly clear. On the best of mornings, it is a pale grey blue, streaked with smoke. On others, it is scarcely visible, hidden behind a curtain of soot. Yet it is not the sky they watch for, but the clock fixed high on the mill's wall. Its hands are large, black, heavy against the pale stone, and they rule with more authority than any magistrate. Too early, and the gates remain shut. Too late, and punishment awaits. To arrive at exactly the right time is rare. Most hurry, fearing the fine that shadows every misstep. The fine is more than a loss of coins. It is humiliation, a mark in the overseer's book, a reminder that one is always being measured. A worker fined too often may lose his place altogether, and with it, his means to survive. The wages are already meagre, barely enough to feed a family, and so each fine cuts deep, pressing hunger further into the home. The children know this as well as their parents. They walk quickly, their eyes lowered, their hands clutching bread crusts, each step careful, precise, as if the cobblestones themselves could betray them. The air grows thicker with every stride toward the gates. The humming of machinery becomes a roar. The town behind begins to fade, its narrow lanes swallowed by the fog, leaving only the presence of the mill ahead. The chimney smokes steadily, untroubled, while the iron gates wait with the patience of something that has already conquered. And so, dawn in the smoke-stained town is not a beginning, but a continuation. The day does not start anew, it simply resumes. The night offered no release, only a pause in which the machines were fed coal instead of bodies. Now, as the sun struggles to climb over the rooftops, the town bends itself once more toward labour. The smoke drifts low, the lint clings to every surface, the fines hang like a shadow. It is not a scene of drama or excitement. It is not a tale of sudden events. It is ordinary, relentlessly ordinary. Yet in that ordinariness lies the weight of the Victorian textile town, the slow erosion of health, of time, of spirit. The dawn carries no promise of change, only the steady march into another day beneath the mill's shadow. The sound arrives suddenly, piercing the fog with a force that no one can ignore. It is not music, not even noise in the ordinary sense. It is command in its purest form, shrill and unwavering, a call that slices through stone walls, rattles glass panes, and trembles through the cobblestones. The whistle is not just heard, it is felt. pressed into the chest, into the jaw, into the very marrow of bone. The town freezes for the briefest moment, then moves faster. Feet quicken, shoulders hunch tighter, children stumble forward, pulled by older hands. No one lingers when the whistle sounds. It is not only the beginning of the workday, it is a declaration of control, the voice of the mill itself, louder than any overseer, more powerful than any master. The whistle is not made for beauty, it is made for reach. From the highest chimney top, steam bursts out, forcing the air into that iron throat and hurling it across the valley. The sound spreads further than the town, further than the rows of cottages that crowd around the mill. Farmers in distant fields hear it. Travellers on the road pause, startled. Birds scatter from hedges and rooftops, though few remain long in such a place. Even the river, sluggish and dark, seems to shiver under the note. Those who have grown up here do not cover their ears. The sound is too familiar, too constant, but that does not mean it does not cut. The old complain of ringing in their heads long after the whistle falls silent. The young cough in its wake, the shock shaking loose what little air was left untainted by soot. Some swear the whistle can be heard even in dreams, long before it blows, as if the body knows to expect it and never truly rests. The workers do not question its purpose. They cannot. The whistle is the measure of their day. It announces the gates opening. It dictates the brief pauses allowed for food. It signals the return to labour, the march back into dust and noise. And when, at last, it sounds in the evening, it is not relief that follows, but exhaustion. For it means only that another day has been consumed. The streets, at this moment, are alive with its echo. The children, pale and thin, rush faster now, clutching scraps of bread as they run. Men straighten their coats, women tuck hair beneath scarves. The air is already thick with smoke, and now the whistle adds its vibration, shaking the fog as though to remind it that even the weather bends here. At the mill's entrance, the overseers stand with their books, pencils poised. They are not shaken by the whistle. For them, it is a tool, a lever of order. They know how many minutes follow each blast, how many workers should be standing before them by the time the sound fades. They watch the streams of people arriving, eyes sharp, noting tardiness, preparing the fines. A man who stumbles in late does not simply earn a scolding. He earns a subtraction, a weight against his week's pay, enough to shrink meals at home, enough to push his family further into hunger. The whistle carries money in its sound, though none of it for the workers. Inside the mill, the machines wait. The looms stand in long rows, their iron frames dark with grease, their threads already stretched and ready. The whistle does not reach them as sound alone, it reaches them as permission. The moment the blast begins to fade, the great flywheels turn, the belts tighten, the spindles spin. The noise grows from a low hum into a pounding storm, faster than breath, faster than thought. The whistle opens the floodgates, and the tide of labour begins. Yet outside, in the streets, the sound lingers. It rolls along the rooftops, into the alleys, down to the river where scraps of cotton float on the surface. Housewives at their washing pause for just a moment, hands in cold water, before returning to their work. Infants cry at the shrillness. Mothers shush them with tired arms. Even those who do not step into the mill cannot escape the command. The whistle rules the town as much as the overseers do. There is a rhythm to its blasts. The first at dawn, loud and long, drawing all bodies into place. Later, a shorter note, signalling the few minutes allowed for breakfast, often no more than a crust eaten quickly at the looms. Then another, sharper still, dragging everyone back before a word can be finished. The same at midday, the same in the afternoon, until at last the final call releases them. But even then, the whistle does not soften. It is never gentle. It ends the day as harshly as it begins it, ensuring that the last thing the workers hear before they step into the evening air is the unrelenting voice of the mill. The whistle also carries fear, for in its silence there lies danger. If it blows at an unusual hour, something has gone wrong. An accident, a fire, a machine broken with violence enough to halt the line. Workers know this and dread it. For though the whistle may announce an end, it rarely brings good news. More often, it is the mark of injury, of another life, caught in the teeth of iron. To live in such a town is to measure existence by these sounds. The church bells, once the keepers of time, are weaker here. Their tones vanish against the shriek of steam. The natural markers of dawn and dusk are hidden by fog and smoke. Only the whistle remains certain, unchanging, as precise as a blade. When it calls, the town obeys. When it falls silent, the town exhales, though never freely. The children especially grow under its rule. They rise to it, they sleep with it ringing in their ears. Some whistle back in jest, pursing lips to mimic the sound as they play. But even their games carry an edge, for they know that one day soon they will no longer be pretending. They will be among those rushing through the gates, their laughter replaced by the cough of dust-filled lungs. The whistle is their inheritance. On this morning, as the last of its note fades, the town seems to pause again. A stillness follows, but it is not peace. It is submission. The workers are already inside, swallowed by the mill's walls. The overseers mark their books. The gates close once more. The streets grow quiet, but the silence is deceptive. For within, the machines thunder, drowning every other sound, and the whistle has done its work. It will not be heard again for hours, but its absence is not freedom. It is only waiting, waiting until the next blast, the next command, the next reminder that in this place, every life is measured not by choice or will, but by the sharp cry of steam forced through iron. The smoke thickens again, drifting low over the rooftops. The sun climbs higher, though no one notices. The whistle has shaken the streets, and now the day belongs fully to the mill. The doors of the mill are heavy, iron-bound, their hinges groaning as if reluctant to release the cold air trapped inside. When they swing open, the first sensation is not sound but touch. A chill breath rushes out to meet the workers, damp and sharp, carrying with it the smell of oil and wet stone. The floor beneath them is not wood nor dirt, but solid slabs worn smooth by countless feet. The stone drinks the cold of the night and gives it back without mercy, so that every step inside feels like walking across the belly of winter itself. Shoes are not guaranteed here. Many of the youngest arrive with nothing but their bare feet, skin thin and tender, pressed directly against the stone. Others wear boots cracked from years of use, their soles worn through so completely that leather provides no more protection than skin. The overseers do not look down to see. The floor is not their concern. It is only the worker's task to endure it, to stand upon it for hour after hour, to let the ache creep upward from foot to ankle, from ankle to knee, until the body bends without realizing. The sound of feet upon stone is its own kind of music. A shuffle here, a slap there, the hollow echo of bare skin against a surface meant for durability, not comfort. The children tread lightly at first, wincing at the cold, but soon enough they learn to move quickly, to ignore the pain, to treat it as background, just one more part of the mill's embrace. The stone does not soften with time. It never grows warm. It remains as it is. Hard, unfeeling, eternal. The air is not much kinder. Moisture clings to the walls, beading into droplets that run down between the bricks. The windows are high and narrow, their panes smeared with soot, so that little daylight seeps through. Instead, the glow of gas lamps flickers along the walls, their flames hissing, feeding on air that is already heavy with dust. The lamps throw shadows across the stone floor, long and uneven, stretching beneath the looms like dark fingers. Workers step over them without thought. It is the cold they notice, not the light. Children assigned to crawl beneath the machines, doffers, piecers, scavengers, find themselves closest to the ground. Their knees, their palms, their bare toes press into the stone as they wriggle between belts and shafts, retrieving scraps of cotton, retying broken threads. Each contact leaves a mark, reddened skin, small bruises, calluses that form too early in life. Some wrap rags around their feet, hoping to soften the bite. But rags slip loose, catch on gears, become hazards of their own. And so the stone remains against flesh, unyielding. The older workers, though spared the crawling, endure the standing. Hours upon hours of standing. Their weight shifts from one foot to the other, but the relief is momentary. The cold travels upward like a slow poison, numbing, then burning, then numbing again. At the end of a day, when at last they leave, their legs feel swollen, their backs bent, as though the stone has imprinted itself upon their very bones. Some speak of a constant ache that never fades, even in sleep. It is the floor they remember most when they lie in bed, the ghost of it pressing against them, as if the stone follows them home. Lint drifts downward from the machinery above, settling in soft layers that collect along the cracks between the slabs. At first glance, it appears gentle, almost like dusting of snow, pale and harmless. But beneath bare feet, it becomes another trial. It clings to damp skin, mixes with sweat, works its way into small cuts until they sting. The stone floor grows slippery where the lint gathers thickest, a treacherous carpet that turns one misstep into a tumble against the grinding frames. Overseers find those who fall, blaming clumsiness, never the floor itself. The fines are part of the rhythm, as constant as the noise of the machines. A child caught pausing to rub an aching foot, fined. A man who shifts too slowly after stumbling on the lint, fined. A girl who dares to wipe the blood from a scraped toe instead of working on, fined. Every coin lost is another meal gone from the table, another night spent hungry. The stone floor in its silence steals as surely as the overseer's book. At times, the workers press close to the boilers, hoping to steal a breath of warmth. But the boilers give heat unevenly. Too much for comfort, too little for relief. Their warmth does not reach the floor. The stone remains cold no matter the season, no matter the fires raging in the furnaces. Winter and summer are the same here. A chill that seeps through skin and into marrow. A reminder that the mill does not care for the softness of the human body. Some of the smallest children try to stamp their feet just to keep feeling in them. The overseers scold, for stamping is noise, and noise is disruption. The irony is sharp, for the mill itself roars like thunder, its looms and spindles filling every corner with their relentless clatter. Yet a child's desperate stamp is punished, while the machines are worshipped for their volume. There is a cruelty in the sameness of the floor. Unlike the walls, which bear cracks, or the windows, which catch soot in shifting patterns, the stone shows little change. Day after day, it appears as it did before. Grey, slick, hard. Only in small patches do stains bloom. Oil spilled from a shaft, blood from a cut, water carried in by boots. These marks fade quickly beneath new layers of lint and dirt, and the stone swallows them as if they had never been. No history lingers here, only the present, repeated endlessly. The workers do not speak of the floor. It is too ordinary, too constant, to deserve mention. They may complain of the noise, of the dust, of the overseer's temper, but rarely of the stone. And yet, quietly, it wears them down more than anything else. Sound can be endured with deaf ears, dust with a strong cough, but the floor is always beneath them, pressing, numbing, unrelenting. To work in the mill is to stand on it, to kneel on it, to crawl across it, until flesh and stone seem bound together. Even when the final whistle blows and the gates open once more, the cold follows them into the street. Their feet strike cobblestones that feel no different. Their houses are floored with stone as well, and the ache remains. It is as if the mill has stretched itself into every surface of the town. The only difference is that outside, the floor belongs to the earth. Inside, it belongs to the machine. The children who grow up here learn early to stop noticing. They treat bare feet on cold stone as natural as breathing. They play at skipping across the slabs, laughing as if it were a game. But laughter turns to coughing soon enough, and the stone does not laugh with them. It waits, as patient as the machines, for them to grow tall enough to join the rows of workers standing still for endless hours. In time, the cold becomes memory. A worker grown old will speak not of the machines first, nor the overseers, nor even the fines, but of the floor, how it chilled the bones, how it followed them home, how it seemed to carve itself into the shape of their bodies. The stone floor is not alive, yet it leaves its mark like a living thing, harder than skin, harder than spirit. It is the first reminder upon entering the mill that comfort has no place here. And so each day begins the same way, with the touch of bare flesh against unfeeling stone, a small cruelty that sets the tone for the hours to come. Before the dust fills the lungs, before the noise swallows thought, before the overseer's pencil scratches another fine into the book, the floor has already done its work. It has already claimed its toll. The air itself is alive here, not with freshness, not with the clean breath of a morning sky, but with threads too fine to see until they drift across the lamplight, glimmering for a moment before vanishing into the throat, the nose, the lungs. Cotton sheds its ghosts into the mill, and the mill keeps them suspended, churning, circling, never settling. One could be forgiven for thinking it snowed indoors, though this snow does not melt, does not soothe, does not bring silence. It clogs, it coats, it smothers. The lint rises from the looms in invisible tides, shaken free each time the spindles turn, each time the threads snap, each time the belts drive their endless motion. It does not announce itself. It creeps, filling every crack between bricks, resting on the iron beams above, sifting into hair, nestling into eyelashes. A worker lifts their hand, wipes their face, and finds their palm dusted with a pale film. Breath feels thick, heavy, as though every mouthful carries something unwanted. Children are the first to choke. Their lungs, still small, draw in more lint than they can expel. The cough begins quietly, a tickle at the back of the throat, easily ignored amidst the roar of the machinery. But the tickle becomes constant. Each breath turns dry. Each word is broken by a rasp. Overseers do not tolerate coughing. To pause, to bend double with the effort of clearing one's chest, is to risk a fine. So the children learn to swallow the cough, to hold it back until their chests ache, until their faces flush red. When it finally bursts forth, it is hidden behind a sleeve, muffled into cloth already streaked with lint. The older men wheeze as they work, their breath rattling like loose bolts in a tin cup. Some spit into the corners when no one is watching, leaving grey streaks where saliva mixes with cotton dust. Others carry handkerchiefs that are never clean, no matter how often they are washed, because the lint embeds itself deep into the fabric. Women, their mouths bound with scarves or rags tied tight against their faces, breathe shallowly, conserving air as though it were rationed. The rags dampen with sweat, with condensation from their breath, and soon become another layer of filth pressed to their skin. There is no escaping it. The windows, narrow and crusted, are rarely opened, and even if they were, the air outside is no gentler, thick with soot from chimneys. Ventilation is a word without meaning here. The gas lamps feed on what oxygen remains, each flame licking greedily at the air the workers struggle to draw. It is said one can feel the lint against the back of the throat within minutes of entering. After an hour, it scratches like grit. After a day, it feels as though the lungs themselves have been lined with cloth. The sound of coughing becomes part of the mill's rhythm, tucked between the clatter of shuttles and the grind of gears. A hacking cough at one end, a wheeze at the other, a suppressed choke somewhere in the middle. Overseers pretend not to hear unless the noise disrupts the machines. Then comes the warning, the threat, the fine. A worker fined for coughing is not being punished for illness, but for weakness, for daring to let the body reveal what the mill has done to it. In the evenings, when the gates open and workers spill into the streets, their bodies carry the lint home. It clings to their clothes, their hair, the folds of their skin. Mothers cradle children already grey with it, their cheeks powdered, their eyelashes rimmed in white. The workers shake out their garments, beat them against door frames, but clouds rise again, swirling into their cottages, settling into their bedding, their food, their very breath as they sleep. The mill's air cannot be left behind. It follows. There are words whispered in the taverns, in the dark corners of alleys, about mill fever, about cotton cough, about lungs that slowly fill with cloth until no air remains. But words change little. There are always more children, more men and women desperate for work, more bodies to breathe the air, until the air itself has hollowed them. The lint does not care for names. It does not care for whispers. It only clings. Sometimes, when the light slants just right through the windows, the air becomes visible. Millions of tiny motes hang suspended, turning golden in the glow, as if the mill were filled with fireflies. To a visitor, it might look beautiful, almost magical, the way the dust dances and whirls. But beauty is not what the workers see. They see the thickness of it, the density, the way their own breath stirs the cloud without ever dispersing it. They see the future lodged in those tiny flecks, a future of breath that never comes easily again. The lint settles on the machines as well, weaving itself into their iron ribs, softening their edges with a deceptive gentleness. Scavengers sent beneath the frames crawl through layers of it, their hair and skin coated, their nostrils white. They emerge looking aged, as though time itself had powdered them, and still they go back again and again, pulled by duty, by hunger, by the overseer's glare. There are stories of workers collapsing at their stations, not from noise, not from exhaustion, but from breath that would not come. A sudden tightening of the chest, a face turning pale, a body sinking to the floor. Others continue working around them, stepping over, weaving threads, tying knots, because to pause too long is to invite punishment. The fallen are dragged aside, revived if they can be, carried out if they cannot. The air does not shift. The lint does not lessen. It remains indifferent. Doctors in the towns grow accustomed to lungs that sound like bellows filled with sand. They listen with stethoscopes, prescribe tonics, suggest rest, though rest is a luxury the mill does not allow. A few speak of bisonosis, a word too long for the workers' tongues, so it becomes simply brown lung. Whatever its name, the cause is always the same. The air that cannot be kept out, the lint that makes its home where no light can reach. The youngest do not understand it at first. They think the tightness in their chest is normal, that everyone's breath burns after a few hours. They laugh at the clouds when they are small, try to catch the motes on their tongues, only to learn quickly that the sweetness of the game is followed by days of coughing. Innocence is brief here. The air ensures it, and yet the work continues. Spindles must spin, looms must weave, cotton must be drawn into thread. The lint is treated not as an enemy, but as part of the landscape, like the cold of the floors, the roar of the frames, the iron of the gates. It becomes invisible not because it is unseen, but because to notice it is to acknowledge a danger that cannot be fought. Better to keep one's head down, to breathe shallow, to swallow the cough, and let the lint weave itself into silence. But silence is deceptive. Inside the chest, the story continues. Tiny fibers lodge deeper with each breath, scratching, scarring, layering. The lungs harden slowly, invisibly, until one morning a worker wakes and finds they cannot climb the mill's steps without gasping. Their body has become another machine, clogged and broken, unable to keep pace with the demands of the day. The overseer sees only a worker too slow, too weak, ready to be replaced. The lint does not leave marks on the skin the way the floor does. It does not bruise like a fall or scar like a machine's teeth. Its damage is hidden, carried in the cage of ribs, in the unseen darkness of the lungs. Perhaps that is why it is so cruel. A bruise fades, a scar tells its story, but the lint gives no sign until it is too late. Its victory is quiet, absolute, and so the workers breathe. They have no choice. Each inhalation draws the mill deeper into their bodies until the line between flesh and fabric blurs. Cotton fills the rooms, fills the looms, fills the lungs, until everything is woven into the same endless cloth. The machines do not pause. Their movement is constant, swift, indifferent. Belts spin overhead, pulleys turn. Iron teeth bite against one another with the steadiness of a clock that does not recognize human frailty. Among this storm of motion, small hands dart like birds, snatching at loose threads, mending breaks, tying knots before the cloth is ruined. To watch it is to feel unease, for the margin between precision and catastrophe is no wider than a fingernail. The threads fly across the looms, a blur of white and grey, snapping and twisting under strain. When one breaks, it is not the machine that stops, it is the child who must move. They slip between frames, bend low over clattering shuttles, slide fingers where iron arms strike faster than thought. They are taught to do it quickly, without hesitation. The machine cannot wait for carefulness. Hesitation costs money. A child of 8 might lean into the frame, his bare feet steady on the cold stone, his hand reaching for the broken line. His fingers tremble at first, but the overseer's stare hardens his resolve. One knot, pull tight, and the loom is whole again. The machine swallows his success without thanks, the way a sea swallows the hand that bails it. Accidents are not rare. The speed of the shuttles leaves little room for error. A finger caught, a hand dragged, skin scraped raw against gears that do not forgive. The wounds are often small at first, a torn nail, a shallow cut. But the work does not stop, and the injuries deepen. Cloth is stained with red, the colour hidden amid the grey until it dries to brown. Those who bleed too much are wrapped in rags and sent back, their task waiting, their pay docked for time lost. There are worse moments, moments that echo through the mill long after the noise has swallowed them. A sleeve caught in a spindle, a hand pulled into rollers, bones crushed before anyone can intervene. The cries rise above the machinery for a brief, piercing instant, then fade into silence as the overseer's whistle blows. The work slows, but it never halts. Another child is pulled forward, trained quickly, set in place. The machine cannot be idle. The flying threads are not only threads of cotton, they are threads of risk, weaving themselves into every heartbeat. Children learn to move with uncanny speed, to see where others cannot, to anticipate the break before it happens. Their eyes dart constantly, their bodies bend and twist with practiced grace. They become part of the machinery, their flesh another cog in the turning wheels. The overseers watch with clipboards in hand, marking fines for every mistake. A broken thread left unattended for more than a few seconds earns a mark. A knot tied poorly earns another. The fines collect like shadows, swallowing wages before they are earned. Fingers must be nimble, not only for survival, but for the fragile hope of a few pence at week's end. It is said that those who begin as scavengers and piecers develop a strange rhythm in their bodies. They twitch in their sleep, their hands moving as though still reaching between the frames. They mutter the motions of tying, looping, twisting. Their dreams settle from the same thread that consumes their waking hours. The mill follows them home, living in their muscles, making their fingers ache even at rest. The threads themselves are merciless. Cotton fibers cut into skin, leaving raw grooves where small fingers grip and pull. The tips of those fingers harden, the nails split, the skin peels. Infection follows, creeping up from tiny wounds, leaving joints stiff and swollen. Some lose the use of their hands before they reach adulthood, their bodies discarded by the very machines they served. Yet for all this, the children are told they are fortunate. Fortunate to have work, fortunate to earn at all, fortunate not to starve in the streets, fortunate to place their hands where iron teeth turn and live another day to return. The word hangs heavy, twisted, because fortune here is measured in survival, not in comfort. To an onlooker, the mill floor might resemble a battlefield of movement, iron clashing, belts whipping, threads flying like arrows. In the midst of this, the smallest soldiers are sent forward first, their hands unarmored, their lives expendable. The air is filled with lint, the floor with dust, the noise with unrelenting thunder, but it is the fingers that bear the most immediate risk. Every second is a wager, every knot a gamble placed against the machinery's hunger. Some overseers pride themselves on the speed of their teams, boasting of children who can mend a thread in seconds. They measure not in years of life, but in efficiency, as though a human body could be valued like a well-oiled gear. The children themselves learn pride in this efficiency too, for it is the only measure they are allowed. Quickness becomes identity. To falter is to be weak. To fall behind is to invite scorn. To slow is to be replaced. The sounds of fingers at work are drowned beneath the greater roar, but they are there. The faint snap of cotton breaking, the quick rustle of hands moving, the muted gasp of skin scraped raw. Each sound is fleeting, buried, swallowed. The mill does not allow stories to linger. There are mothers who teach their children tricks to protect their hands, spit on the fingers before touching the threads, so the cotton sticks. Wrap a strip of cloth around the knuckle to lessen the bite of the fiber. These tricks delay pain, but never erase it. The cloth loosens, the spit dries, and the threads remain sharp. The older workers, their hands twisted by years of the same motions, often pause to flex their fingers when the overseer looks away. Their joints crack audibly, their knuckles swollen, their palms scarred. They glance at the younger ones with a kind of hollow pity, knowing what lies ahead. It is not a question of if, but of when the hands will fail. The mill floor carries its own silent record of these moments. Tiny stains of blood dried into the wood, a nail lodged in the gears, a finger lost and never found again, hidden somewhere in the workings of a frame. The machines carry on, indifferent to what they consume. For all the danger, there is no escape in concentration. The children must keep their eyes fixed, their minds sharp, their bodies quick. But exhaustion blurs everything. Hours pass, and the threads begin to look like one endless blur, lines of white stretching into infinity. Fatigue slows the hands, makes mistakes inevitable. A second's delay, and the machine exacts its price. It is this exhaustion that wears down more than flesh. The body grows accustomed to pain, to wounds, to blood. But the mind, trapped in the endless weaving of threads, begins to fray. Dreams fill with motion, waking hours with dread. The flying threads are not only threads of cotton, they are threads of thought, snaring the worker's mind until it can no longer find silence. And still the overseer walks the floor, still the fines are written, still the machines demand fingers quick enough to rival steel. The children bend, reach, tie, pull. Their hands blur into the machinery, faster than sight, until even their own eyes cannot separate flesh from frame. The day stretches on, each moment another test, each breath another risk, and the threads continue to fly, merciless, countless, endless, demanding fingers that must never falter, hands that must never fail, lives that must never rest. The air is never still, and neither is the sound. From the moment the great belts are set in motion, the mill becomes a storm that has no sky, a thunder that has no clouds. The looms strike their rhythm in unison, wooden frames slamming forward and back with the certainty of a heartbeat that cannot falter. Iron wheels grind, gears gnash, leather belts whip, and shuttles dart like arrows. The noise does not merely surround, it enters, invades, settles inside the skull, until thought itself begins to dissolve. At first, to an outsider, the sound may be unbearable. It strikes the ears like a hammer, reverberates through the chest, presses against the bones of the skull. To the workers, it is the constant condition of existence. They learn not to resist, for resistance is futile. Ears ring, and then the ringing becomes silence within the noise, a kind of numbness that allows the body to function while the mind is drowned. The overseers shout commands, but their words are carried away before they are born. Lips move, gestures sharpen into signals, whistles pierce for a moment and then vanish. Communication becomes a language of eyes and hands, of pointing fingers and stern glares. To speak is to waste breath. The machines speak louder than any human could. Children at the looms grow skilled in lip reading without ever being taught. They know when a supervisor's mouth twists with anger, when the word fine is hissed silently, when a sharp motion of the head means work faster. They know the signals of warning, the sudden lift of a hand, the narrowing of eyes. But all of this is learned within a world where the roar of machinery never ceases. The noise consumes the small details of life. A cough disappears into it, unremarked. A cry of pain is swallowed whole. Even laughter, rare and fleeting, dies before it can travel more than a step away. Each worker is an island within the storm, visible to others, but separated by the unbridgeable gulf of sound. There are accounts of new workers who enter the mill and within minutes feel dizziness rising from their very bones. Some faint outright, unable to keep their balance in the storm of vibration. For the old hands, balance is no longer a question. They sway with the motion of the looms as naturally as a sailor adjusts to the sea. Their ears are dulled, their hearing eroded, but their bodies have adapted to the constant thunder. The price is paid slowly, invisibly, a lifetime of silence carried out of the mill and into the streets, into their homes, into the grave. The older men and women shout to each other in their cottages after the shift, their voices raised even when the room is quiet. Children learn to shout back, growing up with voices trained to cut through an absent roar. Many do not realize until too late that they have grown deaf to the gentler sounds of the world. The crackle of a fire, the rustle of leaves, the whisper of a child. These are sounds the mill has stolen, traded for the relentless crash of frames. And yet, within the mill, silence is more dangerous than noise. When the looms stop, when the belts cease, when the thunder collapses into sudden stillness, fear spreads across the floor. Silence means something has broken. Silence means danger. Workers freeze, hearts pounding, waiting to hear what has failed. In those moments, the absence of sound is louder than the clamor ever was. The noise burrows deeper than the ears. It presses on the chest, resonates in the ribs, rattles the teeth. Workers leave the mill with jaws aching, their bodies vibrating long after the looms have ceased. Some speak of hearing the sound in their sleep, of dreaming of clattering frames and waking to find that the dream has not ended. Others never escape it at all, the phantom thunder following them into every quiet space. A lifetime of machinery etches its echo permanently into the mind. Among the children, games are invented to test how close one can place a hand to a shuttle before it strikes, how near one can lean to a belt before it brushes the hair. But even these small rebellions are done without speaking, without laughter loud enough to draw attention. The noise permits no true joy, only brief flashes swallowed instantly. The overseers move like spectres through the storm, their faces twisted in impatience, their eyes sharp as knives. They rely on sight alone to control the floor. A finger jabbed toward a child, a clipboard lifted as warning, a hand slicing through the air to signal faster, always faster. Their whistles cut briefly through the noise, but even that shrill command soon dulls into the background roar. It is the constancy that wears the deepest. A hammer blow is startling, but 1,000 hammer blows, repeated hour after hour, blur into a single unending impact. Minds grow numb beneath it. Thoughts are lost before they are formed. Daydreams die before they can take shape. The workers cease to imagine anything beyond the rhythm of the looms. Noise becomes both prison and warder, forcing every mind into a narrow cage. The effects accumulate with years. Hearing fades, not with suddenness, but with gradual erosion, as the cliffside crumbles grain by grain. At first, it is the higher notes that vanish, the chirp of a bird, the soft voice of a child. Then come the lower sounds, until all that remains is the dull echo of memory. By middle age, many workers hear little but the ghosts of machinery, a phantom thunder where no real sound remains. Doctors sometimes peer into ears clogged with wax and debris, shake their heads, and pronounce nothing to be done. It is not the ear itself that has failed, but the nerve within, ground down by years of ceaseless assault. Remedies are useless. No poultice, no tonic, no prayer can restore what the mill has taken. And still the machines thunder on. Still the children bend to tie threads. Still the overseers glare. The noise devours everything. Words, songs, thoughts, futures. It devours identity until a man or woman is known not for voice or laughter, but for silence. Even when the day ends and the gates swing open, the noise follows. It echoes in the bones, hums in the skull, rides with the breath. In the cramped cottages, families sit together, their lips moving, their hands gesturing, their voices raised beyond what is needed. Each one carrying the mill's echo inside them. The sound has become more than background. It has become the measure of life. To imagine enduring such a day is to imagine surrendering not just comfort, but thought itself. In that roar, no mind is safe. No idea is untouched. The noise rules, relentless, until all else is drowned. In the endless roar of the mill, there is another presence besides the machines. Quieter, but no less oppressive. The machines crush the body with noise and dust, but the overseers crush the spirit with eyes and penalties. They are the shadows that move across the floor, the dark figures who need no words to enforce their will. Their gaze alone is enough to bend spines straighter, to set fingers moving faster, to make children's hands tremble as they tie broken threads with desperate precision. They do not work the looms themselves. Their hands remain clean of lint, their backs free of stooping. Instead, they pace between the frames, watchful, calculating, their shoes striking the boards in steady rhythm. They carry small books, lists, and ledgers in which fines are recorded with ruthless care. A child too slow? Mark it. A woman stepping aside to cough? Mark it. A man pausing to rub his aching wrist? Mark it. The mill does not waste motion, and neither do its overseers. Every hesitation becomes profit for the master and loss for the worker. The fines come for everything. A thread knotted badly, a shuttle dropped, an accident, even one caused by the machine itself, is tallied as the fault of the worker who stood nearest. Dirt on a floor swept endlessly is a fine. A whisper to a neighbor, lost beneath the roar of looms, is still a fine. To breathe too heavily near the cotton, to sweat on the cloth, to falter under exhaustion, each can be translated into coinode. The mill does not simply consume strength and time. It drains the meager wages that might have made survival possible. The overseers know the arithmetic well. They hold their power, not only in authority, but in the knowledge that each deduction drives the workers deeper into debt. What was promised in wages becomes an illusion, broken apart by fines, until pay is nothing more than a fraction of what it seemed. Some families count their earnings at the week's end and find the total so diminished that food must be spared, rent delayed, children sent out to beg for scraps. The punishments are not always written on paper. Sometimes they come in gestures of humiliation. A boy caught dozing from exhaustion might have his hair yanked, his ear twisted, his body shaken awake in front of others. A girl too slow at piecing threads may be boxed on the ears, the ringing pain added to the constant thunder of the mill. Overseers carry sticks, notched canes, or even leather straps, which they need not use often. The sight of them alone is reminder enough. The workers know that resistance is useless. To be dismissed is worse than to be beaten, for dismissal means starvation. There are darker stories still, of overseers who abuse not only their authority, but the vulnerability of those under them. Women and girls, trapped by need, bear insults, leers, or worse, with no recourse but silence. The noise of the mill is a perfect accomplice. No one hears protest. No one hears shame. Within that storm, Cruelty thrives unseen, but the greatest cruelty is the fines, because they are endless. Unlike a slap or a blow, which ends as quickly as it lands, a fine lingers. It follows the worker home, empties the cupboard, gnaws at the children's bellies. It makes even rest uncertain, for hunger disturbs the night as surely as the machines disturb the day. The system is designed so that the worker never rises, never escapes the balance sheet tilted forever against them. The overseers are not all the same. Some carry their duties with cold efficiency, treating fines as mere arithmetic. Others relish the power, enjoying the flinch of fear, the shrinking of shoulders beneath their gaze, and a few, the rarest, show hesitation, an unwilling glance, a softened gesture. But even these few are trapped by the system itself. Their leniency is noticed, and leniency is not profitable. If they do not fine, they are fined themselves, or replaced by someone less merciful. The mill tolerates no weakness, not even in its guardians. Children learn the overseer's movements better than any lesson in school. They sense when a shadow lengthens near their station, when shoes approach across the boards. Their eyes flick constantly, measuring the distance of danger. It is a life of vigilance, where mistakes are counted in coin and dignity, where every gesture may be watched and judged. Even outside the mill, in narrow alleys or cramped cottages, the memory of those watchful eyes lingers. Children wake from sleep with the image of a looming figure, ledger in hand, ready to subtract from their lives once more. The fines seep into every corner of existence. Families divide meals more thinly, stretch bread with water, boil bones for broth, long after their flavor has gone. A mother trades her own portion so that her child might eat, her hunger hidden behind a weary smile. Rent collectors pound at the doors of cottages, threatening eviction for families already stripped to the bone. Debts mount, wages vanish, and yet the overseers continue their steady walk between the machines, their pencils scratching down each small fault. It is not rebellion that survives here, but endurance. The workers bear it because they must, because there is no choice. To speak out, to strike, to refuse, is to be cast out into a world with no shelter. And so, beneath the thunder of looms and the silence of lost voices, the fines continue, the overseers pace, and life itself is calculated in fractions and subtractions. There is a peculiar cruelty in the way fines are delivered. They are often not explained, not even spoken. A mark on paper is enough. A nod toward the book signals the deduction. Workers are left to guess their fault, to wonder which tiny imperfection cost them bread that week. This uncertainty is its own torment, for it teaches them that nothing is safe, nothing is secure. Even perfection might be punished. In this system, gratitude becomes twisted. To pass through a shift without a fine is not relief, but astonishment. To leave the mill with full wages is so rare it feels like a miracle. Children cling to coins as though they were gold, their small hands closing tight over earnings already destined to vanish in rent and food. And still the overseers walk. Their presence is constant, their shadows falling across machines and bodies alike. They do not need to raise their voices, for the mill itself enforces silence. They do not need to strike often, for the fear of fines is sharper than any cane. They are the embodiment of the mill's will, unyielding, watchful, and utterly indifferent. In such a world, dignity is stripped away piece by piece. It is not taken with violence, but with ledgers and marks, with a system that punishes even the smallest breath out of place. The workers move like ghosts through the haze of lint, their lives reduced to numbers, their worth measured in fractions of a shilling. This is how the mill sustains itself, not only on the strength of hands and backs, but on the quiet acceptance of fines, on the bowed heads of those who know there is no escape. The overseers need not shout. Their silence is more powerful than any cry. And in the endless roar of machinery, the silence of authority is the heaviest weight of all. The looms roar and the belts spin, but another sound lingers here, buried beneath the constant thunder of machinery. It is the growl of empty stomachs, the faint groan of hunger that never quite fades. It moves quietly through the mill, as steady as the rhythm of the shuttles, as unavoidable as the cotton dust that fills the lungs. Hunger is as much a part of this place as the lint that clings to hair and skin. Meals exist, but only in fragments. A crust of bread carried in a pocket, softened by body heat and lint, is nibbled quickly in moments stolen between tasks. A jug of weak tea, bitter and cooling, is shared among 2, sometimes 3 pairs of hands. The fortunate ones might have a heel of cheese, tough and yellowing at the edges. For many, there is nothing but air, swallowed hard as though it might fill the void. Children work long hours without nourishment, their bellies hollow before the day even begins. They leave cramped cottages in the early dark with nothing but the memory of food, their steps slow and heavy before their hands even touch the frames. By mid-morning, their fingers falter, their eyes glaze, and the overseers watch closely, ready to fine them for the clumsiness that hunger makes inevitable. The meals that do come are meager and often tasteless. The bread is coarse, cut with husks and scraps to stretch its weight. Porridge, when it is had, is thin, more water than grain, sometimes flavored faintly with salt if the family can afford it. Meat is a luxury, rare enough that children might go months without tasting it, and when it does appear, it is often stringy, gristly, or near to spoiling. A stew of bones boiled until soft is considered a blessing, though it offers more warmth than substance. Inside the mill, hunger sharpens the senses in cruel ways. The smell of oil on machinery turns the stomach. The taste of cotton lint in the mouth feels almost edible, though it brings no relief. Some workers chew threads of cloth without thinking, not to eat, but to quiet the ache within their bodies. Others drink water from tin cups over and over, filling their stomachs with liquid until it sloshes uncomfortably, trying to fool themselves into fullness. The owners, of course, do not see it. They eat elsewhere, in houses where tables groan under the weight of joints of beef, sugared fruits, steaming puddings, and wine decanters that catch the light. They know hunger only as an idea, a word, never as a constant companion. To them, the workers' meager rations are enough. After all, the bodies keep moving, the machines keep running, and profits rise. But hunger is not only about food, it is about time too. There is no rake long enough to savor what little is eaten. Food must be swallowed quickly, often while standing at the machines. A child may clutch a crust in one hand while tying threads with the other, each bite stolen between movements. To sit, to chew slowly, to taste, these are luxuries reserved for another world. Here, eating is survival, not pleasure. Hunger makes mistakes sharper. A hand too slow because it trembles with weakness can mean a finger caught beneath a shuttle. A head that swims with dizziness may lean too close to moving parts. Many accidents are born not only of noise or fatigue, but of bellies too long empty. Yet even these accidents are blamed on the workers, their costs added to the growing list of fines. There are moments when hunger turns desperate. Children scavenge crumbs from the floor, brushing away the lint to find a morsel that fell. Some steal from each other, a crust lifted from a pocket while its owner bends to pick at threads. A handful of flour, spilled from a sack in transit, becomes a prize. In the streets outside, workers line at bakery doors, noses filled with the unbearable scent of bread they cannot buy. They wait until dusk, when unsold loaves might be offered at a discount, stale but still precious. Mothers in cramped kitchens stretch meals with endless tricks. Potatoes are boiled until they fall apart, mashed with water to appear more plentiful. Bread is soaked in tea to soften it, filling bowls when there is no meat. Bits of onion or cabbage leaves are added to broth, each shred counted, each slice divided carefully among children. Some mothers feign fullness, pretending to eat while slipping food into smaller bowls, their hunger hidden behind stern words. The toll of hunger shows itself in the body. Workers' faces are gaunt, their skin pale beneath the film of dust. Children's ribs press against shirts too thin for warmth. Men stoop earlier than they should, their shoulders narrow, their arms stringy instead of strong. Growth halts in young ones, leaving them small and fragile, their bodies never given the fuel to stretch into strength. Teeth rot early, gums bleed, bones ache from want of nourishment. Yet hunger does not silence. It hums within the body, a low, constant reminder. Workers speak of food often, their conversations reduced to memory and longing. They describe feasts they have never tasted, meals they imagine in detail. The crisp skin of a roasted bird, the sweetness of ripe fruit, the softness of butter spread thick on bread. These are dreams, no more real than the idea of rest or wealth. But they keep the mind alive when the body falters. The overseers care little for such weakness. Hunger, to them, is not an excuse, but a failing. If a child faints, it is laziness. If a woman collapses, it is negligence. Wages are docked, fines recorded, the system grinding forward with no pause for empty bellies. Even fainting is punished, for it disrupts the rhythm of the machines. Still, there are small acts of kindness that survive in the cracks. A crust passed quietly from one hand to another, a sip of tea shared from a tin cup, a mother sneaking an extra bite to the youngest, though it leaves her own belly gnawing. Even in hunger, humanity clings, fragile but stubborn. These moments are not enough to fill the void, but they remind the starved that they are not alone. Hunger stretches into the night, following workers home through soot-stained streets. The cottages smell of damp and smoke, with meals so thin they vanish before they begin. Children sleep with bellies empty, dreams haunted by tables they cannot touch. In the darkness, stomachs groan loudly enough to wake them, louder still than the faint tick of a borrowed clock. Morning comes too soon, with no fullness, no energy restored. Hunger wakes with them, walks beside them, follows them into the mill again. It never leaves, never ends. It is as steady as the machines, as permanent as the lint in the lungs. The workers are not only bent by labor, but hollowed by want. They give their strength for wages, and hunger takes what little remains. And so, amid the crash of iron, the whir of wheels, and the endless motion of cloth, there is always another sound, quieter but deeper, the growl of bodies left unfed. It is the hidden rhythm of the mill, the song beneath the machines, the ache that makes every movement harder and every day longer. Hunger is not an interruption here. It is part of the work itself. In the mill, time is not a friend. It is not even neutral. It is an enemy that stretches itself thin, pulling the day into an endless torment of seconds that barely crawl. The workers know this better than anyone. They live by the clock, yet the clock betrays them constantly. Its face, mounted high on the wall, where no hand but the overseers may touch it, seems to mock them with its slowness. The hands inch forward reluctantly, as though the metal itself resists the passing of hours. From the moment the morning whistle splits the air, time begins its cruel trick. At first, the workers tell themselves that the hours will pass, that each movement of the shuttle brings them closer to the end. But as the machines roar and the lint thickens in the lungs, each minute feels stretched, each quarter hour eternal. Hunger gnaws, feet ache, backs bend, and still the clock barely stirs. The eyes of workers stray toward it often, despite knowing the pain it brings. A glance upward for hope, only to find betrayal. The hand has not moved, or if it has crept so little it seems unchanged. That upward look is a reflex, like breathing, repeated countless times in a shift. And each time, disappointment deepens. The clock does not hurry for them. It never has. The masters and overseers understand this power well. They alone keep the true measure of the day. The bell, the whistle, the clock on the wall. All are instruments not of fairness but of control. There are whispers that the clocks inside mills run slower than those in the streets, set deliberately to stretch the working day beyond the already brutal hours. Whether truth or rumour, no worker dares ask. The suspicion alone is enough to make the sight of that slow hand unbearable. The shifts are long, 12, sometimes 14 hours, and the clock ensures that each feels longer still. Morning blends into afternoon, and afternoon into night, but within the walls it is always the same. The roar of machines, the haze of dust, the aching limbs, the taste of hunger. The workers measure time, not in minutes but in suffering. A cut finger, an overseer's glare, a wave of dizziness. Each marks a point in the day more clearly than the sluggish hand of the clock. Children especially feel the weight of it. Their bodies are small, their strength limited, and the endlessness of the day crushes them. A boy tying threads watches the clock and weeps silently when he realizes only an hour has passed since dawn. A girl carrying bobbins feels her knees buckle as the hand lingers stubbornly between marks. To them, the day is not measured in progress, but in survival, each tick endured as though it were an obstacle to overcome. Some try to escape the tyranny of the clock with their minds. They count silently, hoping numbers will move faster than the hour. They hum tunes in their heads, the rhythm, a secret rebellion against the endless beat of the looms. They imagine meals waiting at home, warmth by a fire, the softness of a bed. But imagination fades quickly against reality, and the clock remains unmoved, unmerciful. The overseers need no whip when the clock serves so well. Its presence alone enforces discipline. Workers know they must endure until the whistle calls the day's end, no matter how slow it comes. Complaints of pain or fatigue fall against the weight of hours still owed. Even fainting earns no sympathy. Time lost to unconsciousness is time lost to labour, and wages vanish accordingly. The overseer's ledgers are as relentless as the clock's face. There is a peculiar cruelty in the way time bends here. Outside, in the smoke-stained streets, hours pass at a different pace. A mother tending her children feels the day race by as she scours pots, washes clothes, and prepares thin meals. A shopkeeper measures the day in customers, in coins exchanged, in the turning of trade. But within the mill, the hours thicken. Each one swells, pressing down upon the body until it feels impossible that so much suffering can fit inside so small a measure. And yet, when the day finally ends, the opposite cruelty arrives. Time vanishes too quickly. The walk home feels short. The evening meal shorter still. The rest in cramped beds the briefest of all. No sooner has the body touched rough sheets than the morning whistle calls again, dragging workers back to the clock that refuses to move. Time outside shrinks, time inside expands, and the imbalance ensures there is never enough of one and always too much of the other. The clock also marks an absence. A child who falters and is carried out is noted against the hour. A woman who collapses is remembered not for her pain, but for the time she failed to serve. Families waiting at home mark their lives by the mill's hours too. They know when the whistle should blow, when footsteps should return, when coins should be brought back in trembling hands. If the clock inside the mill is slow, then the hearts outside are stretched along with it. Workers whisper that even death cannot speed the clock. There are stories of men crushed by machines, of children caught in gears, of women who bled out after accidents. The overseer would stop the loom only long enough to remove the body, then set the machines back into motion. The clock did not stop for them, nor for grief. Its hands moved forward at their slow crawl, indifferent to life, to death, to anything but the measure of profit. To live by such a clock is to lose the natural rhythm of existence. Daylight means little inside, for gas lamps burn even when the sun shines. The body's hunger, thirst, and fatigue are all measured not by need, but by permitted breaks, which are few and brief. The sense of time itself becomes warped. Workers emerge at dusk uncertain whether hours have passed or entire lifetimes. Children grow without understanding the seasons, for their lives are marked only by whistles and bells, not by the turning of leaves or the warmth of summer. And yet, despite the suffering it brings, The clock remains a symbol of hope as well. For all its cruelty, it does measure progress. However slowly, the hand does move. However painfully, the hours do end. Each glance upward may bring disappointment, but each day eventually closes. Workers cling to that thin thread of certainty that the whistle will come, that night will fall, that the clock, though it crawls, does not stop entirely. But hope is thin, easily broken. For even as the hand completes its circle and the day ends, the workers know another begins soon after. The cycle never breaks. The clock that refuses to move today will refuse again tomorrow, and the day after, and all the days to come. The sameness of it is its greatest cruelty. The knowledge that nothing will change, that each slow hour endured is only the prelude to another. In the mill, time is not measured in opportunities, in memories, in joys. It is measured in suffering endured and strength lost. It is measured in the groans of hunger, the ache of limbs, the weight of lint in the chest. It is measured in the endless waiting for the hands to creep forward, for the whistle to sound, for release that never feels like release at all. This is why the clock feels like an enemy. It is not broken, not malicious, but indifferent. And indifference is the cruelest master of all. Against the noise of the looms, against the watchful eyes of overseers, against the gnaw of hunger, the workers could sometimes summon resistance, small acts of defiance, whispered kindnesses. But against time itself, they have no weapon. They endure because they must, because the clock does not care, and because survival requires obedience to its slow, merciless march. And so, the workers glance upward again and again, knowing the disappointment to come, yet unable to resist the reflex. Their eyes rise, their shoulders sink, and still the hand creeps forward. The day stretches long, the night short, and the lives caught between them blur into one long shift beneath a clock that never seems to move. The air inside the mill had already grown thick with lint, noise, and hunger, but none of those burdens prepared the worker for the danger hidden in plain sight. The machines themselves. They stood in long, regimented rows, iron teeth and wooden frames glistening under the dim light. To the casual eye, they seemed like instruments of progress, the marvels of an industrial age that promised wealth and prosperity. Yet to those who stood beside them day after day, they were not marvels, but predators, silent only in the moments before they struck. A loom was never still for long. Its shuttles darted from side to side with the precision of a blade, threads stretching taut, then snapping, then replaced with the quick hands of the worker. Those hands, bare and unguarded, reached into the humming labyrinth of parts, adjusting, plucking, tying, because the machines did not pause for mistakes. The overseers demanded uninterrupted flow, and so bodies moved in rhythm with the machines, tethered to their pace, adjusting themselves not unlike the spindles that turned without mercy. It was in those small adjustments that disaster lived. A loose thread at the wrong angle, a hesitation of a single second, and the shuttle could strike the fingers, draw blood, or drag the hand deeper into its path. When the gears caught flesh, the machine did not relent. There was no switch to stop the cogs, no button to press for safety. The teeth of iron ground onward, indifferent to what they had seized. The injuries were as varied as they were brutal. A child's small arm, drawn too near to the spinning frames, could be swallowed entirely, mangling bone before any adult could wrench them free. A weaver leaning too close might find her hair entangled in the spindle, her scalp torn before she could even scream. Accidents were not rare. They were expected. Every worker had seen them. Every worker knew that the machines were always waiting, watching in their mechanical way, and that eventually someone would misstep. The floors bore marks of it, stains that no amount of scrubbing could fully erase, shadows of accidents long past. The mill went on even as lives changed in an instant. If a hand was crushed, another hand would take its place the next morning. The injured, if they survived, were often dismissed, useless to the flow of production, Compensation was not a right, but a rarity, a few coins at most, not enough to live on. Families who relied on the wages of that worker found themselves suddenly destitute, as though the machine had not only consumed flesh, but also the fragile thread of survival. And still, the machines multiplied. Newer, faster looms arrived, their motions quicker, their appetites greater. To keep pace, workers pushed themselves harder, hands darting faster, nerves frayed by both fear and fatigue. A tired body was slower to react, slower to dodge, slower to withdraw from danger. The 12-hour days ensured that fatigue was always present, always softening reflexes at the exact moment sharpness was needed. The sound of accidents did not always rise above the din of the mill. A shout might be swallowed by the roar of looms, a cry of pain muffled beneath the unceasing clatter. Sometimes, only those closest noticed, the sudden jerk of a body, the drop of a tool, the overseer's hurried stride to drag the injured away. The work around them barely faltered. Production did not wait for human weakness. The line went on. There were moments when even the seasoned worker could not forget what they had seen. The boy who lost his hand to the carding machine, his small fingers shredded as though they were nothing more than threads themselves. The young woman who collapsed when her dress caught in the rollers, the fabric dragging her down, crushing her ribs before anyone could cut her free. These were not rare tragedies, but routine ones, each recorded only in the memories of those who dared to look. Yet memory was dangerous in the mill. To dwell too long on the risk was to hesitate, and hesitation meant accident. And so the workers learned to silence their thoughts, to move as though they themselves were part of the machinery, fluid, automatic, unthinking. Fear was swallowed, tucked away like hunger and pain, hidden beneath the mask of endurance. The overseers noticed hesitation too, a hand that lingered, an eye that faltered, and a fine might be added to the workers' tally, not for being hurt, but for slowing the rhythm of production. The accident itself was less costly to the owner than a delay in output. It was a world where the broken body was seen as less damaging than a broken schedule. Still, workers devised small rituals of caution, a whispered prayer before stepping onto the floor, a charm pinned discreetly to clothing, a deliberate tying of hair tighter, shorter, to keep it away from the rollers. Some carried scars as warnings to themselves, reminders etched in skin that safety was an illusion, vigilance the only defense. Yet even the most cautious found no guarantee. A single misjudgment undid years of careful habit. And then there were the children. Their small size made them both useful and vulnerable. They crept beneath machines to gather drop threads, their bare feet padding across floors slick with oil. A slip, a stumble, and they could be dragged under, their cries drowned in the mechanical storm above them. Some crawled out bruised, others did not crawl out at all. Those who survived learned quickly to move quietly, to make themselves invisible, to hope that the machines did not notice them. What was perhaps most cruel was how quickly life in the mill normalized these horrors. Accidents became stories, retold not as tragedies, but as warnings, lessons whispered among the looms. Do not reach too far, one would say. Do not lean too close. The pain of others was folded into the rhythm of survival, absorbed into the same fabric that the machines wove day after day. Outside the mill, the streets carried the weight of these accidents. A neighbor missing a hand, a cousin limping with a crushed leg, a mother staring blankly at the space where her daughter had once walked beside her. The community bore witness to the cost, even as it relied on the meager wages that demanded it. Each broken body was a reminder of the fragile line between survival and ruin, a line that could be crossed in a single moment between the turning of gears. And yet, the machines did not slow. The mill continued to roar, to demand, to consume. Each day brought new bodies to stand in line with the iron teeth, new hands to risk among the flying shuttles. The accidents, the blood, the pain, they became part of the fabric itself, woven invisibly into the cloth that left the mill, bound for parlors and drawing rooms far away. The finished cloth carried no sign of the cost. No housewife, unwrapping her purchase, saw the missing fingers that had tied its threads, or the lives cut short between its fibers. To the buyer, it was soft, clean, beautiful. To the worker, it was a silent monument to the endless danger, the constant gamble of placing one's flesh against the hunger of the machines. And as the hours dragged on, the machines did not grow gentler, nor did the work grow safer. The danger was not a rare eruption, but a constant presence, like the noise, the lint, the hunger. It was the silent companion of every step, every motion, every breath. The mill itself was alive with it, a living thing that demanded not just labor, but pieces of the body itself. The machines did not care who fed them. They asked for hands, small or large, quick or clumsy, and the owners of the mills had long discovered that the smallest hands often worked the fastest. Children slipped easily between the frames, bent their backs without complaint, and reached into places where grown bodies could not. Their size, their pliability, their very youth became tools to be used, pressed into the rhythm of industry. The day for a child began no differently than for the adults, though it often felt longer. Before the sun had risen, they were shaken awake, their bones still heavy with the weight of interrupted sleep. The warmth of their beds was quickly abandoned for the cold sting of morning air. Bare feet, finding the rough road that led to the mill. Many had already been up late the night before, helping at home, caring for younger siblings, or fetching water for households that could not spare a moment's rest. Childhood, as one might imagine it, games, laughter, wandering without worry, was not something that lived in these streets. Inside the mill, the children were scattered like threads across the looms. Some crawled under machines to retrieve fallen fibers, their small fingers darting through dust and oil. Others pieced together broken threads, their eyes straining in the dim light to tie knots that would hold against the relentless pace of the machinery. A few ran errands for overseers, fetching bobbins, or carrying baskets of material heavier than their narrow shoulders were meant to bear. The tasks were endless, but the expectation was simple. They must keep up. A child's weakness was not an excuse, it was an inconvenience. When fatigue slowed their pace, fines appeared, a coin docked here, another there, often more than the child's day of labor was worth. The mill made no allowances for age. A child could be fined for lateness, for missing a thread, for stumbling, for anything that disrupted the flow of production. To the overseers, the smallness of the body mattered less than the steadiness of its output. The physical strain was immense. The baskets of cotton, though light to the eye, grew heavy after hours of lifting and carrying. Shoulders ached, arms burned, and the thin backs of children bent further with each passing day. The stone floors, hard and unyielding, bruised their feet with every step, the cold seeping upward through their bones until numbness became a constant companion. By the end of the shift, many limped from the building, but limping did not excuse them from returning the next morning. Hunger deepened the exhaustion. The small loaves of bread or scraps of porridge they brought were often consumed before midday, leaving empty stomachs to gnaw quietly as the hours stretched on. A child too weak to keep pace was not simply a risk to themselves, but to the entire row of machines. And so they pushed through, trembling, eyes burning, the roar of the looms drowning out the quiet protests of their bodies. What made the burden even heavier was its invisibility. To those outside the mill, those who bought the fine cotton or admired the even weave of cloth in shop windows, there was little thought of the children who had labored unseen in its making. Childhood, in such a world, was not measured in years, but in shifts survived, in fines endured, in injuries escaped. Some began as young as 6, their bodies scarcely larger than the bobbins they carried. By the time they reached 12, many looked older than their age, their growth stunted, their faces worn with the pale seriousness of survival. The dangers were constant. Crawling beneath the machines, children learned to flatten themselves against the floor, knowing that one slip could pull them into the teeth of the gears. Their small fingers were quick, but quickness was also perilous. The looms snapped shuttles with the speed of a whip, and many children bore scars on their hands and faces from the lashes of broken threads. Hair was tied back tightly, but not always tightly enough. A moment's distraction, and the machine would take what it pleased. Sometimes strands of hair, sometimes an entire scalp. Yet it was not only the machines that weighed on them. The overseer's eyes followed every move, sharp and unforgiving. A child who faltered might feel the sting of a stick against their back, the humiliation of a public scolding, or the quiet cruelty of having their meager wages docked. These punishments fell not only on the child, but on their families, who depended on every penny to survive. The burden then was not just the labor itself, but the crushing knowledge that failure at the loom could mean hunger at home. Some children tried to resist. They dragged their feet on the road to the mill, hid in corners, or feigned illness. But illness rarely brought reprieve. It often meant dismissal, and dismissal meant starvation. Parents, bound by desperation, urged their children on, sometimes with gentleness, sometimes with sternness born of fear. They knew the cruelty of the work, but they also knew that without it, there was no bread, no coal, no rent. The mill owned not just the hands of the children, but the will of their households. The sight of children in the mill became so common that it ceased to be remarkable. They were part of the scenery, as much as the lint that hung in the air, or the endless clatter of the machines. Their small bodies wove in and out of the frames, silent and steady, as though they too were extensions of the machinery. To see them was to forget, after a while, that they should have been elsewhere, at play, at school, in sunlight instead of shadow. And yet, in their quiet ways, the children still carried fragments of that lost childhood. A rag doll tucked in a pocket, made from scraps of discarded cloth. Chalk marks on the stone floor, quickly drawn and quickly washed away. A game of counting shuttles or racing silently from one end of the mill to the other during a stolen moment of rest. These glimpses of play were fleeting, smothered by the roar of duty, but they were reminders that beneath the soot and fatigue, the children remained children. The burden they carried was not only physical but lasting. Their spines curved too soon, their lungs filled with lint before they had finished growing. Their hands hardened into shapes meant for labor, not leisure. Many never grew into the adults they might have become. Some lives ended abruptly, taken by accidents, by sickness born of the air, by exhaustion too deep to recover from. Others grew into adulthood with bodies broken before their time, carrying the scars of childhood labor into the rest of their years. The mill did not grieve their losses. When one child fell, another was sent in their place, as though the body had been nothing more than another spool of thread, easily replaced, easily forgotten. The flow of production did not falter, even as the cost in human life mounted quietly in the background. For those who survived, the memories remained heavy. The roar of the looms echoed long after they left. The shadows of overseers followed them into their sleep, and the ache of stone floors lingered in their bones. The burden of their childhood was not something that ended with age. It was something that lived within them, stitched into their very being, like the fabric they had woven so faithfully. To walk through a Victorian textile mill, then, was to see a place where childhood itself had been unspooled, drawn out thread by thread until it vanished into the machinery. What remained were not children, but laborers, small bodies carrying burdens far too great, their laughter silenced beneath the endless hum of progress. And as the shift dragged on, with hours still to endure, the sight of those children among the machines reminded everyone present of the truth. In the world of the mill, there was no such thing as being too young to suffer. The day inside a textile mill never truly ended. It simply changed its mask. The sun outside might set. The streets might dim beneath the glow of weak gas lamps, but within the walls of the mill, the clattering roar of the machines pressed on without pause. Darkness beyond the windows was no excuse for silence inside. The looms demanded labor without regard for the hour, and so the night was carved into shifts as merciless as the day. For those condemned to the night shift, time lost its familiar shape. The body longed for sleep, but sleep was not permitted. The eyes grew heavy, yet the overseer's shadow loomed to jolt them awake. The air that might have cooled with evening instead thickened with the heat of machinery still burning from the day. Oil lamps and gaslight cast a dim, yellow haze, never enough to pierce the lint-filled air, only enough to reveal the endless spinning of belts and wheels. The mill at night was not quieter, only stranger. It swallowed the natural rhythms of life and replaced them with its own relentless beat. Children often bore the brunt of these night hours. Their small bodies, already stretched thin by daytime labor, were pushed past endurance. The younger ones staggered with fatigue, nodding off only to be startled awake by the crack of a voice or the touch of a rough hand. Their eyes burned from both exhaustion and the swirling fibers that floated endlessly in the air. To keep them alert, they were sometimes splashed with cold water or ordered to run across the floor until their trembling legs could barely hold them upright. There was no gentleness in this endurance test. There was only the expectation that the work must not falter. Adults fared little better. The endless night blurred their minds, leaving them numb and hollow-eyed. The human body, meant to rest under the cloak of darkness, rebelled in subtle ways. Hands grew clumsier, mistakes more frequent. Threads snapped, bobbins slipped. Fingers strayed dangerously close to the teeth of the machines. The accidents that plagued the daytime multiplied when fatigue dulled reflexes and narrowed vision. Each snap of a thread seemed sharper, each hiss of steam more sinister, when filtered through the fog of sleeplessness. The overseers knew this, but their concern was not safety. Their eyes were fixed on output, on the unbroken motion of the looms. To them, a sleepy worker was not a human soul struggling against exhaustion, but a faulty cog that needed discipline. And discipline came swiftly. Fines were levied for drooping at the frame, for slowing the pace, for a yawn mistaken as insolence. Some were forced to stand for hours without pause, their bodies aching against the stone floor, just to remind them that slowness had a cost. What made the night shift particularly cruel was its endlessness. Hours seemed to stretch unnaturally long, the clocks on the wall mocking with their slow crawl. The tick of time that might carry one toward freedom felt suspended, trapped in the thick air alongside the lint. For the workers, every moment was consumed by the same roar, the same vibrations through the floor, the same shudder of belts and wheels. There was no dawn in sight, only the constant demand to endure one more minute, and then another, and another still. The outside world was forgotten, streets empty of chatter, houses darkened, fires banked low. These were sights the night shift rarely glimpsed. They lived in a world apart, cut off from the rhythm of families and neighbors, tethered only to the machines that seemed never to rest. While others slept, they labored. While others dreamed, they counted threads. The simple comfort of lying still in silence became a luxury more distant with every passing hour. And then there was the hunger. Night blurred the patterns of meals, confusing the stomach as much as the mind. Many brought nothing but scraps of bread, too stale to chew without effort, consumed in haste on the factory floor. Tea, if they could afford it, was a thin relief against the weight of exhaustion. The body craved nourishment, but nourishment rarely came. The meager wages of a night shift left little for abundance, and hunger lingered as a constant companion, gnawing steadily, dull but insistent. Fatigue carried another price. Memory itself began to unravel. Words slurred, thoughts drifted, and the workers moved more by instinct than awareness. The endless repetition of motions became a kind of waking sleep, the body acting while the mind floated elsewhere, detached. Some swore they saw figures in the shadows, tricks of dim light and weary eyes. Others claimed to hear voices, whispering beneath the din of machinery. Strange fragments of sound carried on the constant roar. Whether hallucination or exhaustion, the night shift bred its own ghosts. The youngest among them suffered most. Barely able to carry their own weight, they stumbled under baskets of cotton, their steps dragging as though the stone floor itself pulled them down. Overseers barked orders, but even fear could not always push tired limbs into obedience. Some collapsed outright, their bodies crumpling beside the machines. When that happened, another child was often ordered to take their place, as though the fallen were simply another tool gone useless for the moment. The collapsed child might be dragged aside, shaken until their eyes fluttered open, and then forced back into the rhythm. There was no mercy in the night, only necessity. The hours of darkness also brought with them a silence between workers, not silence from the machines, but silence between people. Speech became effort, and effort was already too costly. Few spoke unless commanded to. The voices of children, once lively outside, shrank to whispers or disappeared entirely. Adults muttered curses or prayers under their breath, their words lost beneath the mechanical din. The mill did not welcome conversation, it welcomed silence that matched its own impersonal rhythm. When dawn finally crept near, it brought no relief. Instead of rest, there was often another shift waiting, another demand to continue without pause. Those who stumbled home at last did so through streets just beginning to stir, passing neighbors on their way to work as though they lived in separate worlds. Some collapsed into bed for a few hours, only to rise again before their bodies had truly slept. Others did not return home at all, instead finding corners within the mill to curl into for a brief moment of unconsciousness, lulled not by quiet, but by the unending thrum of machinery still running nearby. The endless night blurred into endless days, and the cycle continued. For many, there was no true difference between one and the other. Darkness and light lost their meaning when the hours of labor devoured both without discrimination. The only constant was exhaustion, a steady erosion of the spirit that carved deeper lines into faces, that bent backs further, that drained eyes of their brightness until they became dull, resigned. The night shift was not simply a period of work. It was a theft of time itself. It stole sleep. It stole health. It stole the chance to live in rhythm with the natural world. Workers emerged from those endless nights changed, their bodies broken, their minds clouded, their sense of self dimmed beneath the weight of fatigue. And still the machines demanded more, their appetite unending, their roar as constant as breath. To imagine enduring such nights, one must picture themselves standing in the thick haze of lint, the yellow glow of gaslight flickering against iron frames, the ceaseless pounding of gears devouring every thought, and the ache in every limb that longs for rest but is denied it. The hours stretch, the air thickens, the body stumbles, but there is no end, only the endless shift of the night. When the endless hours finally dragged themselves to a halt, when the last shuttle rattled to a stop and the overseer's voice softened from command to dismissal, the workers did not go home in triumph. They lingered, waiting for the ritual that came at the end of each week, the distribution of wages. It was not a ceremony of generosity, but one of calculation, a moment when the worth of days filled with lint, noise, and exhaustion was measured not in rest or relief, but in coins that clinked coldly in a box. The counting was done in copper, the smallest coins of the realm, worn thin from countless exchanges, passed from the mill's coffers into the rough hands of its laborers. Each penny slid across the desk was not a reward, but a reminder. Survival itself had been priced, and it was valued cheaply. The process had a rhythm as merciless as the machines. Names were called, one by one, each worker stepping forward with hollow eyes and tired limbs. The overseer or pay clerk would count out the coins, sometimes aloud, sometimes with a silent clatter, and place them in the palm of the waiting worker. Yet the amount was never quite what had been earned in sweat and strain. Deductions appeared like ghosts. Fines for lateness, fines for mistakes, fines for a broken thread or a moment's pause. The smallest errors were transformed into coins withheld, slipping away into the mill's pockets before they could reach the hands of those who had labored. A man who had worked from dawn to dusk might find himself shorted for arriving a minute late. A child who stumbled or slowed might see half their wage vanish. The system ensured obedience, but it also ensured poverty. No matter how fast the hands moved or how steady the bodies endured, the copper was always less than needed. always less than deserved. For families, these coins were lifelines stretched to breaking. Rent was due, bread had to be bought, coal fetched to keep out the bitter chill of northern nights. A week's labour might amount to enough to feed a household in the barest terms, but rarely more. A loaf of bread here, a few potatoes there, perhaps a scrap of meat, if fortune smiled. Yet fortune rarely did. Hunger and thin blankets became as constant as the sound of the looms. The injustice was not accidental, it was designed. Mill owners knew that keeping wages low kept workers dependent, tied to the machines not by choice, but by necessity. The copper paid out at week's end ensured that the worker would return again on Monday, driven by hunger and rent, by debts owed to shops and landlords, by the knowledge that without the mill, there was nothing at all. Poverty became a chain, each coin a link forged to bind tighter. The cruelty deepened when wages were not given in coin at all, but in tokens redeemable only at the company's own shop. There, the prices were higher, the goods inferior, yet the worker had no alternative. Their labour returned to them as stale bread and watered ale, marked up by the very employer who had just paid them. What seemed like wages became another form of control, another way to ensure the flow of copper always circled back to the mill's coffers. For the workers, the act of receiving pay was not joy, but resignation. They counted the coins in their palms, already subtracting the cost of bread, already measuring how much coal could be bought, already realizing how little would remain after rent was handed over. There was no thought of savings, no dream of plenty, only the constant arithmetic of survival. Each week was balanced on the edge of scarcity, and even the smallest misstep, a fine, an illness, an accident, could push a family into hunger. The children, too, learned this arithmetic early. Their wages, paltry though they were, often made the difference between a meal and an empty table. Small hands that had tied threads and carried baskets through endless shifts now clutched at copper coins, their eyes too young to understand how little those coins truly meant. Childhood was measured in pennies, in the contribution to the household's fragile survival. Their labour was not their own, but a necessity pressed upon them by the poverty of their families. The ritual of payment did more than reveal poverty. It stripped away dignity. Workers stood in line, their worth weighed out in the smallest of measures, watched over by clerks who tallied mistakes more carefully than they tallied effort. The exhaustion of the week seemed to deepen in that moment, when the reality of its reward lay bare in the glint of copper coins. Pride had little place in such exchanges, only the quiet acceptance of what could not be changed. And yet, for all its meagerness, those coins were clung to tightly. They represented the difference between shelter and the street, between a thin meal and starvation. Families gathered them in jars, counted and recounted them by candlelight, stretching each one as far as it could go. A single coin might mean an extra candle for the dark nights, or a scrap of cloth to patch a worn sleeve. Decisions of survival were made in increments of pennies, as though every copper piece carried the weight of a life. The disparity between the workers' pay and the wealth of the owners was stark. The profits of the mill flowed upward, fueling the grand houses at the edges of town, the carriages that rolled on cobbled streets, the tables heavy with food and wine. For those who commanded the mills, copper was only a fragment of their fortune. For those who endured them, copper was everything. The divide stretched wide, and the coins in a worker's hand were a daily reminder of their place within it. The monotony of poverty was its own form of punishment. Each week's wage mirrored the last. Each meal repeated the same bread and broth. Each purchase calculated with the same grim precision. There was no change, no chance for advancement, only the slow grind of necessity. Hope was worn away as steadily as cloth beneath the loom, leaving behind a resignation that matched the grey stone of the town itself. The copper coins were also heavy with fear. A worker who fell ill and missed a shift saw their pay vanish. A family that relied on 2 wages but lost one, through accident, dismissal, or death, saw their survival balanced on a knife's edge. The system left no margin, no safety, no mercy. To be paid in copper was to live always at the edge of hunger. always a breath away from ruin. Even the sound of the coins carried its weight. The metallic clink echoed in the silence of paydays, louder than the words spoken, louder than the sighs of workers counting their diminished share. It was the sound of exhaustion reduced to numbers, of days and nights collapsed into a handful of metal, and as the coins slipped into pockets, the workers knew they would return again, for the cycle left no room for escape. Thus, the week closed not with rest, but with reckoning. Wages counted in copper marked the boundary between survival and despair, between endurance and collapse. They were the price of life within the mill's shadow, the meager return for bodies bent, lungs filled with lint, and minds dulled by endless noise. In the dim light of Friday evenings, families walked home through the smoke-stained streets, their coins clutched tightly, their steps heavy. The mill's roar faded behind them, but its hold remained in their pockets, in the copper that dictated what they could eat, how they could live, whether they could endure another week. And so the cycle turned again. Labor fed into wages, wages back into hunger, hunger into labor once more. The copper clinked softly, but its weight was crushing, pressing down on every life bound to the mill. When the last coins had been pressed into weary palms, and the overseer's voice fell silent, the mill did not loosen its grip entirely. It lingered, clinging to the clothes, the lungs, the very skin of its workers. Stepping outside was not liberation, but an exchange of one heaviness for another. The thunder of machines gave way to the quiet oppressiveness of the streets, and the air, though free of lint, was no kinder. It carried the damp weight of smoke and mist, a fog that wrapped itself around the town like a shroud. The streets were not lined with lanterns that gave comfort. They flickered weakly, their light swallowed by the murk, leaving shadows stretched long and broken. The fog was thick enough to soften shapes into spectres, houses and chimneys dissolving into ghostly outlines. What little light escaped from cracked windows was quickly smothered, leaving workers to grope their way forward, step by cautious step. The walk home was a journey through half-seen worlds, where familiar paths became uncertain, and each corner threatened to erase its own direction. The cobblestones beneath their boots were slick with moisture, each step a muted echo swallowed by the fog, the sound of dozens, then hundreds of feet blended together into a muffled procession, a slow march through the haze. Families clutched at one another's sleeves to keep from losing each other, children held tightly by the hand, heads bowed against the damp. The town seemed to dissolve into silence, broken only by the distant bark of a dog or the rattling of a cartwheel, faint and distorted, as though carried from another realm. The fog did more than obscure sight. It carried the smell of the mills outward, mingling with the acrid smoke of coal fires. It stung the nose and settled into throats already raw from a day's labor. Workers inhaled cautiously, as though the very air outside might still claim what the machines had not taken. There was no freshness, no reprieve, only a different form of suffocation, slower, more subtle, yet unrelenting. Children stumbled often on the uneven stones, their tired feet dragging, their small bodies swaying under the weight of exhaustion. Parents urged them forward gently, sometimes lifting them when the path became too treacherous. Even the strong moved with care, for the fog distorted distance and depth, hiding gutters filled with stagnant water or loose stones that threatened to twist an ankle. Injuries on the walk home were as real a danger as those within the mill, for the streets offered no mercy to the tired. The town itself seemed built to amplify the gloom. Rows of terraced houses, blackened by smoke, stood shoulder to shoulder, their windows narrow, their walls damp with condensation. Between them, alleys yawned like mouths, narrow and unlit, filled with shadows that swallowed the brave. The fog clung to these passages with particular hunger, making them seem bottomless, as though to step into one was to vanish entirely. Children whispered stories of ghosts and spirits that lurked there, and in the quiet walk home, even grown men felt their skin prickle at the thought. It was not only fear of spirits that haunted these walks. The fog created opportunities for the living too. Pickpockets who slipped through the haze unseen. Desperate souls who watched for a distracted worker with coins, still jingling in their pocket. The poor robbed the poor, and the fog was their ally. Each family huddled closer together, glancing over their shoulders, though they could see little more than shifting greyness. The end of a shift did not always mean safety, and the walk home was a gauntlet of both imagination and reality. The workers spoke little as they walked. Voices carried strangely in the fog, rising and falling without direction, sometimes seeming to come from ahead, sometimes from behind. To speak too loudly felt like tempting fate, as though drawing attention to oneself might summon misfortune. Instead, the procession of weary bodies moved quietly, the shuffle of feet and the occasional cough the only sounds that cut through the mist. Silence was not chosen. It was pressed upon them by the heavy air itself. Inside the fog, time seemed uncertain. The distance between mill and home stretched endlessly, as though the streets had lengthened under cover of mist. A path that in clear weather might take minutes felt doubled or tripled, the mind uncertain of its bearings. Workers sometimes arrived at their doors with a start, surprised to see the outline of their own threshold emerge suddenly from the gloom. The fog had made the journey feel dreamlike, suspended between departure and arrival, neither fully here nor there until the last step was taken. Those without families waiting often lingered outside the taverns, their doors marked by faint flickers of candlelight. Within, the air was warmer, though no less heavy with smoke, and the ale offered a dulling of ache, a brief forgetting of the lint still clinging in their throats. Coins exchanged for drink were coins no longer available for bread, yet many surrendered them willingly. The fog outside made the world uncertain, but within the tavern walls, the blur of fatigue and alcohol provided a steadier kind of haze. For those who walked past such doors, the fog remained a constant companion, pressing closer as the streets grew narrower, the lamps thinned out, the stones turned muddier, and the sound of footsteps became fewer, as families peeled away toward their own homes. The solitary walker felt the weight of it most keenly, every sound magnified, every shadow given form, every breath a reminder of aloneness. The mill's noise had been a cacophony of bodies crushed together, but the fog made solitude deafening. Yet there was a strange familiarity in this walk. Generations of workers had traced these same paths through smoke and mist, carrying the same exhaustion, the same thin coins, the same hope that tomorrow would not bring worse. The fog was not new. It was as much a part of the town as the chimneys themselves. It clung to memory as it clung to brick, becoming part of the rhythm of life in a place where survival was measured in endurance. When at last a worker's door came into view, it was often little more than a darker shadow against the grey. The entrance was narrow, the step uneven, but it marked the end of the journey. Families slipped inside quickly, closing the fog behind them as though it might follow. Within, a single candle might be lit, casting a frail glow over bare tables and thin blankets. The relief was not in comfort, but in enclosure, in being shut away from the mist that seemed to seep endlessly into the world outside. Inside, the fog did not vanish. It seeped through the cracks in the windows, dampened walls, and hung about the rafters, as though it, too, had made the walk home. Clothes were hung to dry, yet they remained clammy, carrying the smell of smoke from the mill and the town. The fog settled into the very fabric of life, ensuring that even within the home, the outside world could not be entirely shut out. Sleep, when it came, was heavy and uneven. Dreams carried the rhythm of the machines, the hum and rattle that never left the mind, blending with the greyness of the fog still pressed against the walls. The body rested out of necessity, but the mind remained caught between the mill and the mist, between labour and the walk that followed. The night was short, and the morning promised no mercy. The fog, after all, did not lift with the dawn. It lingered, sometimes until midday, sometimes returning before night had fully fallen. Workers awoke to it as they had fallen asleep within it, stepping once more into its embrace as they made their way back toward the mill. The walk home through the fog was mirrored by the walk back through it, the cycle unbroken, the haze eternal. Thus, the journey was not merely one of distance. It was a continuation of the labour itself. a transition from one form of endurance to another. The fog did not allow the workers to escape. It followed them, wrapped around them, ensuring that even the act of leaving the mill could not be free of its weight. The town was shrouded, the lives within it shrouded, and the fog bore witness to it all, silent, suffocating, and unyielding. And so, the mill doors closed behind us once more. The iron gates groan shut, and the fog settles back over the streets. What we have walked through tonight was not a single story, but a day in a world that was once very real, where lint filled the lungs, where the noise of machines swallowed thought, and where a life could be measured in copper coins and coughs that never healed. Think for a moment about what we have faced together. The endless roar, the air thick with dust, the overseer's watchful eyes, the burden pressed onto children's shoulders, and the walk home through streets heavy with smoke and silence. These were not grand battles or glittering courts, but the ordinary grind that wore people down as surely as a water wears away stone. What struck you most about this day inside the mill? Was it the creak of the gates, the cough that caught in every breath, or the feeling that time itself had been stolen by the machines? Share your thoughts in the comments. I always find it fascinating to see what lingers with you, because in these forgotten corners of history, we often find mirrors of ourselves. If tonight's story carried you, if it gave you something to drift into as the night deepened, then take a moment to subscribe to the channel. It helps these histories reach others, and it turns this quiet little circle of sleepless wanderers into a growing community, tiny lights glowing together in the dark. Until next time, rest easy. The past will still be waiting.